All right. Um, yeah. Good morning, guys. Um, so I haven't really been doing too many YouTube videos, and I've noticed the stark difference I've been experiencing with YouTube. Or YouTube for me is just another way of saying, um, do I want to make content or do I not want to make content? Um, I think when I started YouTube, uh, I think it was a way for me to talk about things without having to write them down. Um, but I've also begun to realize that I'm really not that interested anymore in making content. Like making YouTube content, I'm not really that interested in. Not as much as I used to be. But what is fascinating for me, or at least it's a sort of interesting observation, is that at the time when I was very fascinated about making YouTube content, I felt less interested in writing. It felt like more work to write than it did to make a video. Um, Ironically, it feels the opposite now. It it feels like it takes more work to make a video, which of course, if you're watching this video, it's like, well, what work do you put in? You just, press the live button and you start talking. Um, yeah, exactly. And I think that that is what ironically feels more taxing, in a weird way, in a weird way. And then also, I think it has to do more with um, the sort of kind of culture I'm seeing in YouTube and, other areas of social media. Meaning, like, it bothers me that I get on here feeling like I have something to say. Meanwhile, everybody else has something to say, right? um, and strange enough, I should have that same feeling with writing, but I don't. Um, I don't. I don't have that same feeling with writing. And I guess exploring this difference between seeing that everybody else has something to say almost makes me not want to say anything. Um, but of course, you could say that's a sort of narcissistic ego like trap. But maybe that's the whole point, right? That it sort of feeds a kind of narcissism, or it can feed a narcissism. Let's put it that way. It can feed a narcissism. But I would say most of us would be tempted into going into some type of narcissism about this idea of that I have something to say. Um, I think that's really what it does sometimes, is like, the fact that you have to prepare the stage, right? Prepare the environment, turn on the camera. You either plan about what you're going to say or type it out. I've seen people kind of go about this in different ways. But it does kind of feed a little bit of a narcissism in terms of I have something to say. And, now I have to turn on the camera. Um, Now I don't have any plans to. My attempt here is not to moralize this, but I just know for myself, I'm less interested in it, and maybe it was narcissistic for me. I have no idea. I think there's room to argue for it, but I do think at one point I really believed in the things I wanted to tell the world. Um, and there's some stuff I still believe, but I feel less inclined to want to tell it. Um, I think a kind of feeling of resemblance is I recently watched this movie called Eternity at the Gate, and I'm literally gonna forget the artist's name. It's not Picasso, and it's not Da Vinci. I think it might be. No, it's not Da Vinci. But anyways, regardless, um, he said something. The artist said something in the movie. It was a quote, and he said, "At first, I thought that if I did my art, I might be able to help people see the world differently." And I think YouTube has that similar kind of vibe, right? Even if we're talking about like not even malicious intentions, it's like I make content because I hope the world can see the world differently, right? Or at least see it the way I see it. Um, but the rest of the quote said, "But I'm done with that now, and my relationship is solely on eternity." And I think, weirdly enough, even though YouTube will be probably on forever, and unless something happens to YouTube, these videos are going to be available forever, right? In some ways, it's a relationship to eternity. But I'm not sure that's what the artist meant when he said that. Um, I think writing for me is that kind of maneuver, that relationship to eternity. And I think it's also a more, at least for myself, it's a more sincere relationship with myself, whatever that means. Um, I don't really know what that means, but it that's what it feels. That's what it arises. Um, so yeah, that's my main thing about YouTube and why I feel less inclined to make videos these days. And then um, the second topic I wanted to talk about was self-help culture. Um, I've been reading a lot of Adam Phillips lately, which you can say he's like, I mean, I hate to call it, he's not really a Freudian, but he likes psychoanalysis. He's very interested in psychoanalysis, and he used to be a psychotherapist or a psychoanalyst, or a child psychoanalyst. And now he writes books. And you could say Adam Phillips kind of borders on the line of a kind of psychoanalytic self-help books, right? He kind of borders that line, mainly because he makes his books so accessible to the public. Um, I think like a book that's coming out this year actually is called Giving Up, I think, by Adam Phillips. I don't think it's out yet, but it's coming out in April, I believe. Or I'm getting it confused with Zizek's book that's also coming out this year. Um, I think Christian Atheism. But anyways, um, yeah, Adam Phillips, arguably you could say, is almost within the realm of self-help culture. But interestingly enough, Adam Phillips is not interested in qualifying his statements. What he's interested in is writing good sentences. That's like his thing. That's like his phrase. He's interested in writing good sentences. Um, but anyways, my main point about self-help culture is that it really exemplifies the Freudian point that we are fascinated by words. We are extremely fascinated by words. Um, and this plays, the whole thing about, Lacan's quote, right? That the unconscious is structured like a language, um, which I guess is a common misremembering about Lacan because they tend to equate it with language, but it's like a language. But you can see this likeness or the fascination, in my opinion, more apparent with YouTube and self-help culture. And interestingly enough, you can also see it with Instagram as well, and probably other social medias. But Instagram is an interesting case because I remember when I first got the app, it was really about photography, about pictures. And then the app kind of evolved into pictures with words. And that's something to really think about. Because I think Instagram initially wanted to be more about like, this is just for photos. But now it's kind of become a more homogenous, or very, homogenous kind of app with other apps. And of course, I don't really know the timeline, so it could be possible that other apps transformed. But like, for example, YouTube kind of took the Reels thing from Instagram, but now Facebook has its own Reels. So um, everybody discovered that someone briefly talking is more fascinating, or watching something is fascinating, for several minutes. But anyways, yeah, that's just my kind of second observations about things. And then lastly, because we're already talking about Adam Phillips, um, I've been, as some of you know, I've been reading Promises by Adam Phillips. I'm about, I'm about like halfway through the book. But there is really something that, one of my favorite chapters is actually one of the shortest ones. And it's actually about Lacan that Adam Phillips wrote. And it's called Manicuring Jacques Lacan. Um, and there's a passage that I think really exemplifies how Adam Phillips looks at psychoanalysis and what he would like others to do with psychoanalysis. And so, and just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of the chapter about Lacan, is that Adam Phillips opens the chapter with, or the essay, you could say, um, with this woman, Rudinesco, who wrote a kind of biography on um, Jacques Lacan. And, you know, uh, Adam Phillips is talking about how basically the biographer for Jacques Lacan is kind of having misgrievings about Lacan in his behavior. And there's always interesting notes about how Lacan kind of lived a double life, right? He had um, almost two sets of families, and children on each side. But anyways, I mean, and Adam Phillips says really interesting things about this, but um, this is my favorite part about what Adam Phillips took from Lacan and its kind of cult membership. He kind of phrases it like that. It's kind of cult membership. Um, so this is what he says. He goes, the lesson of Lacan's daunting and exhilarating self-fashioning is that psychoanalytic heroes, from Freud onwards, always have a sadomasochistic relationship with both their admirers and their detractors, and of course with themselves. If there are to be usefully inspiring psychoanalysts in the future, rather than merely cult figures, they will have to stop trying to have new theories and aim instead just to write interesting sentences. And they should never teach their own work, only the work of others that they value. From a psychoanalytic point of view, no writer can be the privileged authority on what he finds he has to say. And above all, they must never involve themselves in formal groups or so-called institutes of psychoanalysis, but simply, like most other people, just try and find people they like talking to. All right. So what are we getting from Adam Phillips on this idea? Um, and I think this is why I really like Adam Phillips, because Adam Phillips is, without me knowing it, he's the style that he has the style that I've always had, the style that I never knew I had, or the style I never knew I wanted. um, but yeah, we can look at psychoanalysis for, as Adam Phillips says, um, which it always concerns me sometimes with people's enthusiasm for Lacan and Freud and perhaps other psychoanalytic thinkers, is that they're so interested in coming up with new forms of the theory, um, and also very interested in wanting to teach their own work. And Adam Phillips is really pointing out something fascinating here because, um, in some ways, you're wanting to become the master. Um, and so towards the end, towards the end of that chapter, which I now, which suddenly now I'm just like, yeah, I think it's actually good that I read this now. Um, here's the last couple lines of what Adam Phillips says on that chapter. He goes, let me get this part. He goes, when there are no more students, there will be no more masters. What Lacan's life teaches us, unlike his fabulous writing, is that prestige should not be the name of the game. The lesson of the master is the one we should stop listening out for. Experience, quote, as Lacan wrote, is not didactic. So, I mean, to me, this is really Adam Phillips in a nutshell. I mean, he's really trying to break out psychoanalysis from its good boys club kind of thing. Um, and to, not want to come up with new theories, but rather teach the people that you find interesting, or that teach about the psychoanalysts that you find fascinating. So in a strange way, um, Adam Phillips is tasking the world with more teaching, which might mean coming up with better sentences. And it's really interesting. It really is an interesting thing because, uh, when we think about the stain of psychoanalysis, at least in America, people don't like Freud. And so the task would be to, in some sense, not overcome Freud, um, but return to Freud in a way that he might be worth listening to. And what that would involve, like Adam Phillips is talking about, is coming up with better sentences, teaching him in a way, and what he could possibly offer. Because I think there's, and Adam Phillips is really observant about this issue because he definitely sees the dividing lines with psychoanalysis, is that psychoanalysis is so interested in itself. And when psychoanalysis is so interested in itself, it becomes a kind of, good boys club. And the other end is that there's a bunch of people not interested in psychoanalysis. So Adam Phillips is really concerned about the fact that psychoanalysis and the people that do it are so interested in it and interested in themselves talking about it. And then the rest of the world is sort of barred from the psychoanalytic language because, well, if we're being honest, and Adam Phillips talks about this, is that the psychoanalytic language is really demanding. And you can't expect the average person to even dare to be interested in it without a sort of overt commitment to it. In some sense, if we're calling a return to Freud, you have to really commit to a return to Freud and its language. What Adam Phillips is entertaining is, how do we keep our interest in psychoanalysis without keeping our commitment to its dogma and its language? And this is why he's talking about psychoanalysis doesn't need more theory. It just needs better sentences, which is really the whole premise. Honestly, it's really the whole premise of Adam Phillips' Promises book. If I'm being honest, it's really that's really it. He's really saying in different ways that psychoanalysis needs better sentences, and less theory. And so, and I would say, even though this book was like written in like 2000, it's been like almost 24 years now. I think his observations are quite right. People that are interested in psychoanalysis are always find themselves in a kind of psychoanalytic club. Um, and I think Adam Phillips is not bashing that to some degree, but I think he's also talking about the fact that there is no breaking out of that. There is no breaking out of that. And I would say, from my own experience, what some of these people do with psychoanalysis is that they're very interested in theory. And they're also very interested in trying to come up something with new about theory. And psychoanalytically, you could say it's worth discovering why that desire exists. Why is it that when we get interested in psychoanalysis, we're so interested in being the one that comes up with a new theory or a new discovery or a new fascination, something that was missed? Being the one that discovered it is something that's really telling about our desire and our interest in psychoanalysis. But this can also be applied with literally anything else. It means, for example, why do we read philosophy? Because some of us read philosophy because we're so interested in coming up with the new theory, the new system. And Adam Phillips is really questioning those intentions, because what does it really say about our interests? It would mean for Adam Phillips there's something very childlike about it, that I want to be the next big thing kind of thing. And Adam Phillips is telling us in a kind of very kind way that let's not always try to come up with something new. And I would say the proof that is there of what Adam Phillips is saying can be found in the outside world. The outside world of the world that is outside of psychoanalysis. You can find that. You can find people's mischaracterizations of Freud, Lacan, whatever that may be. You can find it out there. So at this point, I think what Adam Phillips is asking all of us is that, is it really worth at this point to continue developing new theories when people really just don't understand the sort of what you understand about psychoanalysis and why you find it so interesting? And and what Adam Phillips is provoking in that is that if you find it so interesting, why don't you talk to people outside of it? Why don't you talk to people that you would like to talk to that aren't a part of the book club, that aren't a part of the club of psychoanalysis? And that's a very interesting thing to want to think about, I would say. And this is why I really like Adam Phillips. And it's also, I think, reading him has also helped me really temper the urge. And I think in an honest way, I'm not interested in coming up with new ideas. Like, I think that was the thing that I was, wanting to be really bad, right? I wanted to be the guy coming up with new ideas. Now I just kind of look at it like, these are my observations. And I guess if it's a new idea, then it's a new idea. But I'm not really actively trying to diagnose the world. It's just more like, this is what I see, and these are my comments on it. And My hope is that I just make it as interesting as possible, or at least provocative as possible. Um, I'm not interested in being right, I would say. I found myself over the years to be less interested in being right and more interested in how to be interesting. Um, and I think that's really the lesson of Adam Phillips. But yeah, all right. That's enough on my end. All right, guys, take care.